Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in today's video, I'm going to be covering how to win these wizard solo shuffle lobbies as a balanced druid so you can start climbing. These are going to be very common. Our first main goal is going to be to get dots on everything, get your Fury of Elune on cooldown because it's such a low cooldown. You want to generate as much astral power as possible to proc our incarnations. So you want to send that as soon as possible. Nature's Vigil up for the enemy cooldowns. This way we're going to mitigate some of the damage incoming to make it a bit easier for our healer to deal with it through the opening stages of the match. Then we're going to pop our incarnation as soon as we've ramped up our Boomkin aura to 3 stacks. This way our critical strike rating is as maximized as possible and our damage output is going to really skyrocket as a result. You want to be casting Cyclone a lot in these lobbies so that your healer doesn't have to deal with counterspell. You can try and fake them, get a precog, but ultimately you want to be the main target focus for interrupts so your healer doesn't have to deal with it. If you're just sitting here spamming Moonfire and never casting Clone, this is probably why you're losing these lobbies, because your healer is just getting interrupted and you're going to die. So try your best to avoid crowd control on your healer like that. Here I see the priest moving in to fear my healer, so I'm pulling back and away in the direction of my monk so that when they come out of the fear, they're going to be more able to save us. And we're not really kind of pushing in on top of our enemies here. We're cycloning enemy DPS, again, soaking those interrupts or getting crowd control. We cyclone the mage, forcing the trinket, and we're continuing to keep dots up, spamming Moonfire or Sunfire, depending on if you're solar or lunar. Here, you'd likely want to spam Moonfire if you have Sunfires up because it's going to hit 2 targets with twin moons. This is going to give you more damage overall, and our main goal is to just maximize damage. Here our healer is feared again, but our opponents are being pushed back. Our shaman has used wall to mitigate damage, and we're actually able to force ice block even despite our healer being in crowd control. Now you can see our monk here got interrupted. That's pretty risky, so we definitely want to be focusing a little bit more on casting Cyclones. Nature's Vigil pretty much on cooldown in these types of matchups because it's just all about number output, and Nature's Vigil is going to help you mitigate it. Here we get a nice Cyclone onto the Warlock. Priest decides to Mass Dispel it. I'm going to sprint my team in. Using Stampeding Roar to push in on your opponents when you're ahead or running away when you're falling behind is a really good idea. This is going to allow you to reposition much more readily. Here our healer is crowd controlled, so you can see I'm healing, I'm knocking back, and I'm cycloning. Anytime my healer is crowd controlled, I'm looking to aim at mostly defensive play, which is healing and cycloning or bashing or knocking back until they're out of crowd control. And then look, as soon as they're out of crowd control, we're back to just keeping dots up and pressure. We do cyclone the Warlock here. I think it was likely because I see Icy Veins from the Mage, but might not have been necessary. It's Power Infusion on the Warlock. So definitely want to cyclone, Power Infusion, get Icy Veins out of the game, mitigate how much they get to benefit from their offensive cooldowns as much as you can, because it's just all about efficiency. Here there's an Observer. It gets sniped from the Warlock. Really important that you're not spam casting spells while Observer is up without targeting it down to that eyeball that comes up into the air. We had a Cyclone onto the Mage, gets Mass Dispelled again. Our monk is in a fear, so I'm going into bear form. I'm looking for Cyclones. I get reflected on it, but our shaman has wall, so ultimately this isn't too bad. I basically ice blocked myself to the Chaos Bolts, and our shaman can just use wall. We cyclone the Warlock afterwards here. Our monk is so far ahead on mana. All we have to do is basically keep dots up and stay alive at this point in lobby number 1, and we're going to be able to take the W. We get a stun here onto the priest, forces the trinket. We get infernal stunned. Here, if we had Stampede again, we could use Stampede to push in on top of them, but they're pretty much going to fall over. I don't overextend here because I'm 30% and they're all dead. So like I've got dots up until I'm a little bit healthier than 30. I'm not going to run in, even not going to get too far ahead of myself. Kind of important to realize that moment as well in your matches. If you're jumping in like when you're at 30%, you're probably going to die. You want to hold off a little bit. The next round, we've got a Warlock here. And again, it's going to be kind of the same goal. Just keep dots up. Try and use our solar beams onto the healer here if it's a non-gnome healer. If it's a Resto Shaman, it's better to solar beam DPS or lock him on a healing cast. If it's a gnome priest, again, locking them on a penance can be really good. But you don't want to waste root beam if the opposing healer can get out of it with any sort of removal. We've got damage rolling here. Fury of Elune very early. We root beam the healer. This forces the healer to trinket. Our Fury of Elune is generating astral power, so we can start working towards our arcanic pulsar. My talent tree will be linked in the description down below. Then we look for a Cyclone here onto the priest with no trinket. This is going to allow us to get a lot of pressure onto the mage here with altar time up. I tried to cyclone it, ended up getting wind sheared on it. Cycloning altar time or cycloning pain suppression can be really good. Here I cyclone the mage on greater invis while Icy Veins is up. Our monk is feared. We bash the priest. We're going after the healer a bit. Kind of risky to do what I'm doing here. I renewal. Monk ends up saving me, but not mitigating damage there while our healer was crowd controlled made this a bit scary for the monk. We're going to innervate the monk, although really there's no way that the monk will lose on mana. Monk's mana and Soul Shuffle is just absolutely out of this world, but better to use it than not. And look, we're not soaking interrupts, and look how low we're getting because we're not soaking interrupts. We do Cyclone the Mage to stop damage, but because our monk is getting interrupted, we're starting to fall behind, and this is why you may be losing these types of solo shuffles, is because you're not casting enough. It can be really easy to fall in this Moonfire spam trap with this build because your damage is so high and it feels good, but if you're not soaking interrupts, you're going to lose because the healer's going to get interrupted and the other team's going to run you over. We get a Solar Beam onto the healer, again, non-gnome priest. We want to be root beaming the priest and then trying to cyclone them, and look at that CC chain. It's putting the mage really far behind. We get an ice block. We can just immediately swap to the Ellie. You always want to switch. Never tunnel vision a target when you've got an AoE comp like an Ellie Shaman or a Destro lock. For the third round of this lobby that I'm going to look into is when we played with a mage. This AoE build doesn't work. You're going to need to play single target and play for crowd control when you play for a mage. So you'll see that huge shift in a moment. Here our healer is crowd controlled. So we go for cyclones. We go into bear form when we're counterspelled. Mitigate damage. Healer is still feared, ends up breaking to damage, but we need to be focusing on defense. I'm off healing. I'm helping support. Anytime I'm just immediately recognizing my healer's in crowd control by looking at the frame here, immediate defense mode activate. We can kill the Healing Stream totem while our opponents are running away. Healing Stream does a ton of healing regardless of the shaman spec, so if you have a chance to kill that totem, can be good. Kill off the Sky Fury totems, mitigate their damage as much as possible. We get stunned here, ends up getting interrupted, but trinketing Lightning Lasso also isn't a bad idea. Here my Warlock's going in on the right, so I go in on the left. This is another mistake I see in wizard lobbies, is you stay on top of each other chasing people in a circle. Sometimes it's better to split up and surround them. That way somebody is always casting. Here the priest pre-fades my root solar beam, so this can be a bad moment because you're going to lose a lot of crowd control. Could have maybe got a trinket from the priest, so paying attention to phase shift on priest healers is going to be really important so that you're always maximizing your crowd control into the future. Mage has Icy Veins. We're going to cast Cyclones. We're not going to stop casting Cyclones. We're not going to stop casting heals. Icy Veins is a big damage increase, and our monk is feared, so we're going to bash the mage. Don't care if it's on DR. We're trying to mitigate as much damage as possible. Mage gets a full sheep, so we're going to need to start retreating away. So we use Stampeding Roar, and we start retreating away. We get wall. Monk's not comfortable. Trinketing during Icy Veins as a healer is a good idea if you're a healer in this type of situation. Anytime a big, long cooldown like this is up, generally that's going to be when your trinket is going to also align. Otherwise, you might just die. So we stay alive for that push. Now we're trying to get offensive again, keep dots up onto our opponents, get our Moonkin aura, and make sure our Moonkin aura is going and staying up. And we've got good pressure on the mage, and we just get an ice block, basically just with some rifts here from the Destro Warlock, which is why it's important to always just be doing damage to these lobbies. Priest is getting really aggressive here, so I think attacking the healer when they start doing this type of stuff to try and get fears is a really good idea, because you're going to put a priest really far behind, or a Resto Druid that comes in to try and clone. We're probably not going to see a Resto Druid, but any type of healer that runs in on top of your team when in these wizard lobbies, really important to swap. You get a ton of pressure on the shaman here. Go for a solar beam onto the mage to stop crowd control. I don't want to fall behind. We've got such a good position right now. If we get crowd control, it's the only way that we could lose. We knock back the polymorph. We get a counter spell onto the polymorph, and because we've disrupted the crowd control onto our monk, we've put them so far behind that there's no chance for them to win. Now in this third round, I think that I get the mage, and we lose, and I'm playing AoE, and we're going to skip a little bit ahead in this one, so you can see why it doesn't work. We actually get out-mana'd. So with a mage, it's just not the same amount of damage. Polymorph, Cyclone, and Root Beam are going to be way more effective. We chose not to crowd control, just kind of throw Ice Lances, do damage, and trade. But in a Wizard Mirror, Ellie Shaman and Destro Warlock are going to outpace you with a mage. You're just not going to be able to keep up, and yeah, like we just get cracked. And we're really far behind in mana. Even if we used cooldowns here that we had, we were going to lose on mana. So I shift my talents in the final lobby. We're going to skip ahead because these play very similar to what we just saw. We're going to skip ahead to the final lobby here where we play with the mage again, but we're going to make an adjustment. We're going to play single target, and I'll have this talent build linked in the description as well. And playing single target, playing aggressive on the enemy healer as opposed to running away and doing damage, and chaining crowd control together enabled us to win. This is very important against Mistweaver Monk, as any caster comp. You need to be on top of them. You need to be crowd controlling them, interrupting them, or you're not going to win. They're going to outpace every other healer. So we just sprint right in, solar beam the healer, get dots up, and start trying to get this party going. Enemy Monk incaps us, but we're going to stay right next to them. We're going to bash them out of the solar beam, go for clones. We get sheared. Who cares? We get a double ring of frost. We're playing on top of them. We go for incarnation while the monk is CC. We get a cyclone. We don't care about shield wall. Just keep attacking damage. Keep the monk in crowd control as much as possible. And you try and go for another clone, and we're able to just run him down in the opener and close out with 5 round wins. Now, of course, they could have responded a little bit more appropriately, and if they had survived in that moment, it's kind of like a hit and run strategy. Now we should be running away and trying to survive to the next solar beam to make that crowd control push again. But if you're getting mages, And if they're not fire, if they're fire, you can just do damage. But if they're frost or they're arcane, playing for crowd control and playing for like this aggressive strategy, crowd control strategy, is the only way I think you're going to win in these types of wizard lobbies. So it's important to be able to flex your talents when you notice that. Generally speaking, high crowd control single target classes play the single target build. High AoE damage like Destrolux and Electrons play the AoE build, and you're going to be doing fine. I've got my ultimate Boomkin guide. I'll link it here as well if you want to check that one out. I did decide to craft the crafted cloak that procs a shield and a heal. I've noticed it to be really good in the meta with rogues where you get bursted down and it gives you a nice little bit of recovery. So definitely would recommend crafting the cloak as your secondary on top of precog, which I don't cover in the guide. But other than that, I hope that you've enjoyed this commentary and it helps you out on your climb. If you liked the video, make sure to hit it with thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.